Pihei moiora, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for joining. My name is Brendan O'Connell, and delighted to have you all here today for what I'm hoping is going to be a really engaging discussion. I know I'm looking forward to it. It's one of my favorite format of events that we do, to have a chat with people who've got some experience worth sharing. And as you would know from registration, the main topic here is talking about the World Agri-Tech Summit in San Francisco recently, which is part of an ongoing series and a really important event series to connect with the agri-tech world globally. I was able to attend the London version of this summit last September myself. It was the first one that I'd attended, and I definitely got plenty from that experience. I remember meeting plenty of doppelganger organizations of New Zealand organizations up there, and it was quite insightful to see how they were approaching their own investment models, what their paths to market were. And so to get that type of insight I found really useful. And it was also interesting to see how groups there was a group in September, there was a group from Saskatchewan who presented themselves in a way that could easily have been a New Zealand presentation. So it's a great series of events, and I think there's a lot of insight to be taken from attending. And we're lucky that we've got four members and ecosystem partners who probably each have a slightly different perspective from their attendance. Probably went there for different reasons, and so we thought we'd come here today and have a bit of a discussion around what's happening out there that we can see through these summits. And maybe a little bit around how to make use of these type of summits going forward, because there's definitely going to be more opportunities to do so. So we've got four panelists joining me today. During the session, please feel free to put your questions into the Q&A spot at the bottom of the screen. I'll do my best to pay attention to that Q&A piece and bring up questions that you ask. And I encourage the panelists to keep an eye on that as well, and just answer those Q&As directly yourself. Joining us today, we have Ruth Leary, Darren Keeler, Peter McFlanagan and Aaron Sisley, and I'll let them introduce themselves so you can hear a little bit from them as we go through. So Ruth, if you don't mind, maybe I'll pass over to you directly, and you can tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and what was it you were hoping to achieve when you went to the summit.
Thanks, Brendan. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, I'm excited to be beaming in, thanks to Starlink from Wanganui, actually, from Easter holidays. But yes, this was my first World Agri-Tech. I found it a very useful experience, and certainly planning on attending again across our business. So I'm actually head of the strategy and engagement function at a newly formed public-private joint venture between the New Zealand government and agribusinesses in New Zealand. And the focus for us is reducing agricultural emissions, so particularly livestock emissions, so methane and nitrous oxide. So part of my visit was networking, collaborations, a lot of one-on-one meetings were had, but also scanning the landscape really with respect to the strategy work that I do, understanding what tools and tech are out there, what we already know about, but also what's new and on the horizon that we could be looking at to reduce our emissions here in NZ.
Excellent. Yeah, well, great purpose at multiple levels to be getting out there, Ruth. And of course, I know this series of events also has a specific focus on livestock in some of the events. Although I know that was earlier in the week of this particular series. But great,
yeah,
thanks for coming along with.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Nice to see everyone.
Hey, Aaron, I wonder, could you give us a bit of an intro to yourself? And again, why did you end up going to the summit?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Brendan. And thanks for inviting me to the webinar today. So I am from Auckland Uni Services, which is a company owned by the University of Auckland. And the team that I'm in is a commercialization team. So our primary role is to take the research and the intellectual property that our academic researchers and sometimes our students that they generate through their research and take that out into the real world, try and create products and services from it, create impact from it, actually get it up into use as opposed to just ending up in, say, an academic journal or staying in the lab. So we primarily do that through spin-out companies now, where we will put intellectual property into a spin-out company. Often we'll try and get a researcher to go into that company as a founder, taking some sort of role in the company. And then the company will either go forward to operate as a company itself, selling a product or a service, or it will go forward to try and license whatever technology it has, or to collaborate with an external partner to create something in the real world that has real impact. So from my perspective, I was attending the World Agri-Tech Forum for the first time to try and see a bit about what sort of the big trends are, I guess, in terms of that space. It's not an area where the University of Auckland has had a huge amount of research going on, but I'm keen to kind of generate a bit more of that internally, because I think we have some great researchers with a lot of expertise that would be applicable. We have strong engineering, strong chemistry, strong biology, all the sorts of underlying basic sciences. We can feed that into creating new IP and research for the sector. But there hasn't been a big focus on it. So I was looking for messages, signals, trends to feed back into the university and try and encourage our researchers to go into particular areas or to expand into particular areas that are relevant to the agri-tech industry. Also, of course, looking to make connections, understand the sort of the ecosystem, also evaluating this particular conference to see whether it's one that we would like to attend on a regular basis. So that's something I could talk about a bit more later.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. And you actually went to the summit with potential propositions for various parts of the audience. I know we spoke before you went, and you had activities from within uni services and the university of particular projects that might actually be investment ready or seeking different type of partners. So you were quite focused in heading up there.
That's correct. Yeah, we had a small number of projects, which are mostly still very early stage, but we're lining them up to have those conversations with potential future investors. One of whom is Ruth, I discovered.
Oh, well, you went a long way to meet a neighbor.
Yeah.
How funny is that, huh?
Yeah. Great. Hey, Peter, thank you for joining us. Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and what you were looking to achieve by heading up to the summit. I know you're no stranger to the idea of technology scouting. You've been doing some great work at Zespi, but maybe tell us how an event like this fitted into that work.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Brendan. So I work at Zespi, based here in Mount Wanganui, and I work within Zespi within the innovation team. And within that team, I lead the on-orchard technology portfolio. So as Brendan alluded to, we've done a bit of global tech scanning in the past. We conducted a big piece of work on this last year. And following on from that work, we've done a number of follow-up, more sort of specific scans. But when you spend a lot of time scanning, you realise that that there's a lot out there, and from looking at stuff just in reports, it can be difficult to know whether things are actually real. And so at the end of all of that scanning process, one of the things that we've just been through at Zespi is through some strategy planning sprints. And so it was really useful for me to have really clear focus areas that we're looking for the application of technology to solve some really clear problems. And so I went to the summit with 3 specific problem sets, a background of global technology scans. And what I was really wanting to do at the summit is connect with people and really understand what's actually happening on the ground, and for some of those technologies to try and validate whether they're actually legitimate or whether they're just smoke and mirrors on websites and in papers. So one of those in particular is out of Israel, and when you look at the videos and the images on LinkedIn and reports, it just doesn't seem real. But I met the founders and the company, saw their solution, and now we're in follow-up discussions after the summit to look to see if we can shape up some project work from that. So it's a massive opportunity to connect with people and talk through things. Like, there was a ridiculous number of people there, and just the discussions and networking and actually, talking to specific problems was just invaluable.
Great. Well, I was going to try and avoid the spoiler alert and ask whether you actually achieved your outcomes, but you've gone straight in and said it obviously delivered exactly what you needed, and being able to do that type of validation with the Israeli team. So that's great. And there was a question that just popped up there from Tim Cutfield. You can decide whether you want to answer it, Peter, but can you share the 3 problem sets that you were going up with in mind, if that's appropriate?
Yeah, sure. So out of that strategy, we've got 3 focus or priority programs of work. So one is around on-orchard decision making, and that's with a focus on what we can do around fruit quality, yield, and orchard profitability. And when we talk about orchard profitability, that's not just saying at a high level we want to make heaps of money. It's about understanding the impact of decisions that you're making and the direct or flow-on effect from a financial perspective of that decision. The second is around work efficiencies and automation, and within that space, we're looking specifically at the high cost activities around winter pruning, thinning, and also harvest. So we've already done some work in that space, but there's some significant challenges that we need to overcome there. And then the final one is around crop estimation at a national level. That's really important for us in terms of market pricing and market allocation. So that's also has a flow-on effect for all of our growers as well.
Great. Well, there's no doubt the work that you've been doing in that tech scouting space have positioned you guys really well to be clear about what you're looking to achieve at events like this and other pieces. So yeah, well done for that background work, and glad that it's paying off in when you can be so clear on missions like this. The fourth of our panelists is no stranger to the either to the audience here or to the international audience through these summits, because I know, Darren, you've attended many of these events over the years and have found different purpose for them. But maybe you could just let people here know, first of all, who you are and a bit about Way Beyond, but also what you were looking for on this particular visit to the San Francisco Summit.
Sure. Thanks, Brendan. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming along. So I'll talk a little bit about Way Beyond first, and then talk about the relevancy to the event. So Way Beyond works in horticulture, dealing with fresh produce production, but we focus on what is termed controlled environment ag and protected cropping systems. So, for example, that our customer base produce vine crops, so tomatoes, peppers, capsicums, and cucurbits, and they generally produce those in greenhouse systems of varying degrees of sophistication. And then the other category is berry production, which is predominantly done in tunnels. And it's highly relevant to what we do because they're both quite data-rich environments. And the way that Way Beyond works is we focus on seed to harvest optimization. So production, it's focused on not just yield, but quality outcomes for the producers, because that leads directly to profitability. So there's a clear linkage between those two things. The way we approach it is we combine our understanding of crop biology and physiology. We marry that to data science and then AI methodologies. And that's basically how we, work with the growers to determine how they apply essentially digital tools. So I think one of the key things with us is it's not just about providing digital tools, it's about showing them what does digital farming look like compared to traditional farming that's largely been manual and analog. So there's a significant educational aspect to what we do. And really the goal is industry transformation. So we were a sort of global from day one startup, which when you're doing that from New Zealand is a big deal because the tyranny of distance is real. So that's then sort of segues into if you want to create a company that's going to impact an industry globally, who else are you going to need to help you do that? And that kind of connects to this event. So the reason why this event's really critical for an ag tech founder or someone who's in a senior position within an ag tech business is because it's where the investors and it's where the strategics play. And I'm going to just call it out and just say, you won't succeed with a global ag tech proposition if you don't network into this part of the ecosystem. So winning an ag tech is an ecosystem play. It's not just a customer play. I mean, a customer play will get you so far, but if you really want to, dominate, then you're going to need to make sure you're well ensconced with the strategics in the industry. And the summit is essentially where they all go. So it's where they all go to network with each other. It's where they all go to see, what are the emerging trends, whether it's in the food area, how does that trending in the food and consumer area, how's that going to flow through to farming production? And that same company actually runs 2 events that normally coexist alongside each other. They have the food innovation, where they'll talk about everything from plant-based proteins to lab-based proteins and et cetera, and then it'll be about, well, how does that flow down to everybody who actually produces all the ingredient products or produce. So it's a very important scene to be in, and that's why we were there specifically on this occasion around investors, and I'm happy to expand on that.
Yeah, well, there's something to celebrate on that front, but maybe we'll keep that for a little bit later. But just picking up on your ecosystem comment, it actually reminds me of one of the comments you made, Peter, via email around, the fact that it is a busy market out there, and events like this will have a real ecosystem perspective to it. So there'll be investors there, but there'll be other agri-tech businesses as well. And Peter, you mentioned about companies getting used to the fact that there's a lot of competition out there, but there's also large markets out there. Did you find the summit had that sort of rich of many different players?
Yeah, I was quite surprised that people weren't, when they were speaking, they didn't really have that competitive mindset on. They were more into partnering, and there's enough space for all of us to play. Also, it was clear from a grower perspective is that growers or farmers still want to have choice. So they're not saying we want to lock ourselves in with one provider and they'll do everything and we won't talk to anybody else. So there were growers there that were speaking about working with a number of providers. And I think this sort of flows on to another thing that really stood out for me, is that it's really important to know what your core skill is that you're adding to the operation. There were a number of people who spoke about the pitfalls of trying to do too much, and trying to, and there were some big players there that had gone down a path which wasn't their core expertise. They'd thrown a lot of money at trying to do something and wasted a lot of time, and then in the end they partnered and everything became a whole lot easier. So I think that there's some really important things there, that the playing field at a global level is big, and to understand what your value is and then look to partner.
Great, thanks, Peter. I guess that bring the fact that there is that level of competition out there, and another comment that you made, and I'm hearing as a sort of a reality of this ecosystem place. Maybe it's a maturing of the whole agri-tech sector. Is the concept of integration and interoperability. The fact that there will be multiple solutions out there, farmers and growers will want choice. And so they're going to look at different solutions that they expect to integrate in together. Does that ring true in terms of what you're seeing? Does that ring true, Darren, from your perspective, both what you see at the summits, but also what you're experiencing in action within the business?
I think it depends on which part of the ag sector you're in. We were just talking internally about this yesterday. That when you look at agriculture overall, the broadacre row crop space, they kicked off, the sort of move to digital about a decade ago. It depends on where you want to market, but if you sort of start with geospatial imaging, that was really the first application of new technology. into that space. I would say pastoral farming was probably next cab off the rank. And then hort is the last one in, you know, maybe 5-6 years ago. So they're all at differing levels of maturity. With respect to integration, interoperability, I mean, I thought that was going to happen fast and early. I can say in hort that is definitely not the case. Everybody's still, you know, gleefully living in silos. Whereas in the broadacre space, there's actually a startup that I met, the founder I met a few times, whose sole function is to create APIs to integrate different systems. So, for example, integrating between John Deere and what's it called now? Climate Field View, which is Bayer's digital farming product. So you now are, but it's taken 10 years for the industry to get to the point where you've got those large kind of commercial enterprise farming operations that are now saying, oh yeah, we need to actually integrate all these things. So I think that we're very much still, as an industry, we're still at the baby step phase of just introducing digital, the concept of what that is, how will that impact changes in farming practice, you know, what are the advantages, all those things. I mean, I think it was still at a very formative stage with the industry.
Yeah, I think we could have an entire webinar on that topic alone, so I'm reluctant to go to harp on it.
Yeah,
as
I'll
a single
stop it
one
there for that very reason.
Too much, and it was just that it sparked from your ecosystem comment and some comments that you'd made by email, Peter, that I thought it's worth. But I guess what I've seen myself at the London summit, and then hearing these comments, and you know that events like this are a great sort of benchmark. Well, how are things progressing? You know, in terms of interoperability, we speak so much about interoperability here in New Zealand at different times, but just to recognize that it's not just a national challenge here that we look at in particular respects. It's actually just a maturing of the entire agri-tech sector, depending on which part of that sector, as you say, Darren, you know, which particular service it is, you know, it's coming. So it is a maturing thing, and probably the faster our businesses here can develop their skills in that space, the better impact they'll probably be able to have both locally and internationally. Yeah,
look, I mean, I think my guidance to an ag tech founder or company would be, you know, don't assume that that's going to be there. Yes. You know, whatever you're building, make sure it's open, so that it's ready for when that does start to manifest in the industry. But don't assume it as part of your strategy that you're going to get easy integration. Yeah. Well, in addition to interoperability, you know, what were the other burning issues that people heard surfaced or discussed at the sessions? What was the World Agri-Tech audience spending their time thinking about at the session that you can share with us here today? Ruth or Aaron, any particular thoughts that you took away of that was the burning issue?
Yeah, I think one thing I heard a theme coming through quite strongly, I'm sure Darren and Peter, you would have seen this before, is a lot of founders forget about adoption. So it's all very well to be quite supply-led in your thinking when you've created a new technology or tool, but you know, there was a few stats being bandied about, you know, new software, carbon software, for example, for farmers. I think it was a free platform. 60% think it's a great idea, 5% have downloaded it. This was in the US, I believe. So it just shows that no matter what we do to get tools and tech, you know, and for my focus, it's getting to farmers in New Zealand and trying to get tools into their hands to help them reduce methane or nitrous oxide. It's really that education piece. It's sometimes misunderstanding about profitability and what you can do there. And of course, then there's incentives and a lot of work around policy as well that's required. So it's quite a system-wide approach needed on the adoption piece, and it's something that needs kind of front-loaded with the thinking. And there's a lot of talk about behavioural scientists coming to the table as well in the early stage, rather than leaving that to, you know, 5 years down the track of the product design.
Oh, interesting. Was that a topic of conversation at the summit, that behavioural science focus?
Yeah, that came out. I'm trying to think who that was. It might have been Ether and Cousin, I think, from Food Systems for the Future. She was talking about that that real need for. We had a women's and ag tech breakfast actually while I was there, which was a great session. So we had the some of the leading women speakers opening the ag tech that came along, and it was quite good to bend the ear a little bit about, you know, New Zealand's unique situation where, for example, in my area, you know, 50% of our emissions in New Zealand are from agriculture. So we've got quite a burning need to really think about some of these big system-wide problems and what the solutions might be, and take the learnings. One other thing I wanted to call out before I forget is a lot of talk about the regulatory system as well, and how we need to really help those regulators help us, because we can innovate a lot faster than we can regulate or develop policy. So that's particularly true, you know, in the space that I'm looking at too, where we need to, yeah, we're kind of making up as we go new policies, new acts, and new amendments to try and deal with these new tools and technology that maybe 10 years ago we wouldn't have thought of. But certainly there's some breakthroughs and step changes enabled by you know, gene editing as an example that was talked about quite a bit at World Agri-Tech, and then later in the week at Future Food Tech too. Also biologicals. So, you know, for pest control, for example. So it's really interesting to think about how we can be more efficient, you know, establishing common test protocols globally, for example. You know, what else can we do to leverage all of that trial work and testing work on a global scale, rather than just taking a very insular view.
Was that link between, you know, adoption being one of the challenges, you know, in use and growth of agri-tech, and regulation and helping regulators, you know, is there a link between those two things? You know, is there a suggestion that regulations can help adoption? Was that a topic of discussion that you were hearing in San Fran?
Yeah, I heard a couple of examples of that, and did speak to, I think it was a lady from Saskatchewan actually at the breakfast as well, about how you know, the regulatory framework is designed from what is already, and trying to adapt it for what's coming proactively is a real challenge. So she was actually working quite a lot in the regulatory space. Yeah, I think for us, you know, farmers, there's potentially tools out there already, for example, you know, for methane mitigation or nitrous oxide mitigation, but they're not approved or allowed for use for that specific purpose or to make those claims. So then to get them in the greenhouse inventory and so on, it's a real process. So yeah, I think we do need to really work quite closely with the regulator to help, I guess, be efficient where we can in that process.
I'm already finding it fascinating that all the issues or themes that we're talking about are issues and themes that we talk about just in the domestic side of things as well. I mean, they're burning issues here, whether it's adoption, interoperability, and regulatory settings and the connection between those things, and then gene editing. And I know that was one, Aaron, that you mentioned, you know, as one of the themes that you heard coming through at the summit. And I know you've made comments by email around the genetic engineering discussions that you heard at the summit. But what were the burning issues that you came away on, or you heard at the summit, Aaron?
Yeah, well, I guess the genetic engineering, genetic modification one is an ongoing conversation in New Zealand, which I'm perhaps a little reluctant to get too deep into, not being an expert. And
well,
let's
take it off the table straight away by just clarifying that all of the conversation is just hot air in New Zealand at the moment, because it's on nobody's policy mandate. So we can talk between our scientists, we can talk between our primary industry groups, but there's not a single politician who has it on their policy paper leading up in an election year. So we can forget any policy changes or anything happening in that until that happens. So unfortunately, there's no point talking about genetic engineering here, because I'm sure many of us would have similar views. Those mature views are well demonstrated internationally. They're well understood here. And it doesn't matter a toss at the moment, because there's not a single politician willing to face up to it, not even our science minister. So we can talk as much as we want, but it's not going to help anything. So we'll take that one off the table. What else did you hear?
Yeah, sure. So I guess following on from what Ruth was saying, in terms of adoption, one of the things that I guess surprised me as somebody who's relatively new to AgriTech, was something that hadn't quite occurred to me before, was the long testing and trialing kind of times that are involved with new technologies. So people were talking about 3 to 9 years worth of field trials to get a technology to the point where some farmers or growers are going to take up that technology and actually commit to buying it, which was surprising to me. I mean, most of the projects that I tend to work with at the university are biologicals, pharmaceuticals, biotech type of stuff. And some of those, like the pharmaceuticals, will have very, very long development, huge costs, decades worth of time to get them to market. So I was surprised that AgriTech can be, close in terms of the time periods. And then I guess that raises the issue, particularly for the smaller companies, the startups who are looking for investment. Venture capitalists, private equity, angel investors, a lot of them are not used to those kind of investment timeframes. They will be looking for some sort of return, some sort of a value inflection point after, say, 5 years. So if you're still, in the thick of testing with your potential future customers and nobody's committed to buying anything, then that's problematic. So you're maybe restricted to some degree to perhaps the sort of larger corporations who are in AgriTech already, who are doing some sort of corporate venturing, maybe have their own investment arms who can invest into your company. But it does make your options, I think, a little bit narrower. And I feel like that is perhaps an issue to some degree for the industry. Interested to know what others think in terms of those early stage companies looking for investment and where they can go to for that. So that was one thing that came through for me.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I can comment on that.
Go ahead, Darren.
So, I mean, that's you're right. You've nailed it on the whole discussion around the investor side of it. I mean, it's a very tough thing when you're an agri-tech company to raise money, and more than any other category, I'd argue, other than probably biotech. So as soon as you're leaning anywhere into that deep tech kind of application space, it gets much harder because investors have this time boxed horizon that came from a Silicon Valley template created 20 years ago, you know what I mean? And we're trying to wrestle them out of that. Case in point, when we made the announcement about BASF venture capital investing in us about 4 weeks ago, I mean, that getting a strategic fund, industry strategic fund to invest is critical to our path, but that took a long time to get the attention of that community, if I call it that, and then to secure one of them as an investor. That was a fantastic achievement, Darren, and I mean, I know it was a hell of a lot more hard work than just turning up at conferences around the world. It would have been a lot of work, real hard work in between. But how did the ecosystem of these type of summits contribute to the relationships that have led to BASF's? That's a great question, Brendan. So the answer is this: that there's another event that was held at the Donald Danforth Plant and Science Center in St. Louis. And I started attending those in 2014. I think that was when I just got into the industry. And I went for 3 years. The final year I was a speaker in 2016. So I was still on the database. And in 2019, the organizer emailed a bunch of us and said, "Oh, look, we're looking for some video content. Have you got anything?" So I sent a video featuring one of my team, actually, Sophie, and so we sent that and they played it at the event. And at the event, one of the investment managers from BASF Venture Capital saw it. And then he contacted me on LinkedIn and said, "Are you looking for money?" So that's literally how it started.
That was a good video.
Well, yeah, but I mean, what it does is it shows you, everything is like a slow burn. You know what I mean? And part of what I do is I just plant seeds everywhere. So everywhere I'm going, I plant the idea of us and what we're doing, and you've got to go out and network really broadly, and you've got to go and attend all these different events to try and figure out, which are the ones that are most critical what you're trying to achieve. But the payoff for those things could be years down the track. And
Really
in
good
this
point.
industry, that is how it works. And so the thing is that I mean, that was 2016 I last spoke at that event.
Yeah.
But that was the event that triggered the investment manager to contact me in September of 2021. But then look at the timeline, and then the announcement in February or March of 2023, right? So that's how long it is, right?
Yeah.
But that's example of the point that Aaron was making around the nature of well, that you asked me about the events, but Aaron asked about the strategics. But that's basically what you got to do. And you got to survive long enough. I mean, the other thing is we're the only, out of all the companies that started in 2016, out of the global cohort. So that's all the companies that were our sort of peers that arose in Canada, the US, Israel, and the Netherlands, which, by the way, is where it all comes from. We're the only one left, right? They've either been acquired, ran out of money, gone bankrupt, because to Aaron's point, again, you've got, he mentioned about the, trials, farm trials. Farm trials are multi-season events, I mean, we've still got customers who call their engagement with us a trial or a POC or a pilot, even though it's been going for 2 or 3 years. And we're busy trying to convert them into full-blown commercial, deployments. But that is picking up momentum. And so we just signed, I mean, we can't announce this publicly in terms of who it is, but we just signed a 4-year.
Oh, you with friends here? Go on, tell us.
So no, nice one, Brendan, but no. But that's taken 2 years to be able to get to the point of establishing, a 4-year contract. Because again, we're B2B enterprise. So that's the other thing. It's long sales cycles. But once you're in, I mean, this is the great thing about ag. Once you actually establish yourself, you could be there for 20 years, right? So.
Right. Yeah, a couple of really key points there, I think, and it's something we've talked about before at some other sort of investee discussions that we've had in the past about that long burn, planting those seeds and being patient both. And I know it's themes that I'm sure come in terms of they get a lot of airtime at the moment in terms of investors understanding more cleanly now that actually a lot of these agri-tech investments do require patience, and they will require, somewhere between 3 and 9 seasons in many cases to really come back. So investors need to understand that. But like you say, even the before investment's happy, the relationship build that you've been doing, Darren, takes time and comes over time. You guys would have visited.
Thing, and I'll just end on this, then we can move on to one of the other guys. Is the payoff is there?
Yeah,
it's not like it's not there. It is there. It's just getting to it. Takes all those things we just talked about. But I wouldn't want to dissuade anybody, that it's not possible. It is possible, to get there. And I think we've got to maintain a very positive mindset around that. Yeah.
Well, thinking about positive mindsets then, I mean, you guys visited San Fran in the same week that the Silicon Valley Bank was going pear-shaped. And I'm sure that had quite a theme on both at the event, but also in the bars afterwards and anywhere else that was going on. I'm sure it was quite a theme, and there's been a lot of press since then around exactly what Q1 has ended up for global VC, and so there's been a shaking of the vines, so to speak, just in the last 3 months. And yet there still seems to be some understanding, even from the conference, that, the level of investment required to change food systems in the way that need to be changed is significant, and there is going to be more investment. What did you think, what did you come away thinking about the mood for investment and global opinions in that space? Who'd like to take up that one? Ruth?
I'll just make one little comment, and yeah, I heard the $1 trillion number actually with respect to that food system transformation. I think one thing that came through is the food and ag tech system is part of the solution as well. So the investment may be large and may have quite a longer timeline than some of the other venture investments, say looking a decade ago. But if there's patience and different pools of capital deployed to enable it, then the rewards and impact can be potentially huge. So it's a lot of talk about collaboration and different types of capital, moving back to tier 1 banks, and definitely a bit of a risk-averse theme from some speakers. Yeah, but that's the main thing I noted. Yeah.
I noticed there's a question in the Q&A about, whether we think AgriTech investments are more aligned with VCs or large family offices or private capital. And if I'm hearing your answer there, Ruth, it's probably sort of, to some extent, it's a mix of all of the above. And I think there are VC funds that are learning that it might not be what they thought it was, but it's still a place to be. And yes, of course, family offices take a different sort of risk and time horizon, and probably do private capital. But any other thoughts from anybody around that?
I think it depends on the stage of the company, though. I mean, I think that what you're seeing emerge is that there's definitely more general VCs that are generalist VCs that are interested in what's happening in the ag and food tech space, even though they don't really understand it. But they inherently know that they should probably be there. So I think that's becoming a little more prevalent. I mean, if I think about the VCs we're talking to at the moment, so we're completing a Series B1 right now, of which BASF is part of that cohort or syndicate. We've got 2 generalist VCs in New Zealand, and we've got 2 specialist VCs in the US. But even those specialists are only fairly recent to the party, right? So they're still trying to figure a few things out. And obviously for them, having BASF there, who are a specialist, grants a lot of reassurance to the others, because they've already validated what we're doing. So that becomes really important. But I would say the overall mood was still pretty positive, despite what was happening with Silicon Valley Bank that very same week. Because I think the pullback's been in a lot of other categories, crypto, fintech, certain consumer app applications, but food and ag, I think, is being seen as a critical industry for investment. And so I think that we're going to see more money, not less money, going into the space. But I think it's going to be more, I think the hurdle to get the money is still going to be really high in order to get the support from the investors. But I want to touch on one other thing. Sorry, just want to remember, because I saw a question and thing. So one thing that's really important is the profile of New Zealand, right? Now, I've got a major problem with this, right? So if I've got an axe to grind, it's this, right? Is that I'm now increasingly spending a lot of time when I'm doing a pitch, I start off now talking about New Zealand and New Zealand ag and ag tech innovation, because nobody bloody knows, right? I mean, people know we produce a lot of meat and dairy and wool fiber, right? I think we've been good at getting that message out to the world, but they don't understand what we do in biotech and ag tech. So I now talk about it to sort of like frame the conversation. Because
your audience that you're talking about is audiences like
the customers,
the investor audience,
and as the investors, right? Because they think Israel. Yes. Israel is what they think straight away. Israel is where everything, that's where it's all at, you know what I mean? And then they'll talk about the Netherlands, and in our category will be the other one they talk about, and it's infuriating. Right, because if you look at the depth and breadth of what New Zealand's achieved in the last 50 years, with genetics, with biotech, with agricultural technology development, I would hold it up. If you actually gathered all those stories and presented them, I would hold that up against any of those other guys, right? But we never tell that story. So the thing is, when you're going,
or if we tell it, or if we tell it,
you know,
maybe we tell it to the wrong audiences or with
well,
the
it's
wrong
yeah,
focus,
it's not
because
yeah, it's
obviously
to different audiences, you know what I mean? But people
Yeah.
don't know that plant and food research exists, and that it has, you know, whatever it is at the moment, 800 scientists, and that they developed all these apple cultivars, or berries now is another area they're investing in. You know, nobody knows that, you know, and it's like,
So a lot of
and
the
if people
focus-
did know that, that would
Yeah.
be like a huge sort of foundation of credibility that about what the country can produce.
Mhm.
You know, so I think there's so much more we could be storytelling we could be doing, but it's got to be focused on what's happening and what we've generated over this 50 years amongst the Crown Research Institutes. You know, what is actually being successfully monetized, productized, you know, across all these related disciplines. You get that out there, and it's going to make our job a lot easier to raise money.
Yeah,
That's my opinion.
that's really really appropriate and good message to get across. I mean, I was fascinated again in London. It's interesting to meet that, for you to say, Ruth, that you met some more of the Saskatchewan team. But when I saw the Saskatchewan presentation in London, I was thinking, well, you could almost just quickly go and get some post-its and try and scrape out the word Saskatchewan and put up New Zealand, and the storyline would have been very similar. The imagery was not dissimilar, and their story was around, you know, access to farmers and growers who are good at adopting technology, access to good research institutions, access, you know, to good innovators, and, you know, come to Saskatchewan and do your developments. And, you know, and I was going, well, that is the story we can tell here. I mean, obviously, even there has been some work done, quite a bit in terms of the AgriTech story. And a lot of that focus has been on the AgriTech story that would be brought to end users and consumers. There's been a focus on, you know, a national story piece that would have, you know, would set the scene for people who are doing direct lead generation with farmers and growers in different parts of the world. And there's been an emphasis in the UK and a bit of an emphasis in the US dairy in that space. I guess what I'm hearing here in your battle cry, Darren, is actually, if we want to help better investment flow, it's this type of audience. It's the World Summit, AgriTech Summit type audience, where we need to be adapting elements of that story to better set the scene for everyone, so that, you know, these whether it's the investor groups, which are the large multinationals, you know, start seeing New Zealand in a new light.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, that is the audience. I mean, all they talk about, I mean, Ruth, the other guys have touched on this. I mean, all they talk about is biotech and genetics and, you know, data and ag, you know, I mean, it's very high level, conceptual, futuristic stuff. I mean, this is the forum where all of that comes out. And if you kind of want to know where it's all trending, this is the event you need to be at to hear it all, you know.
Yeah.
But that's precisely the audience to be, you know, telling the story of New Zealand's development in this space. You know, I really just think we've got so much to tell and we don't tell it. You know, it's very frustrating, as you can tell. I'm frustrated by it. So I think, you know, that would help a lot, you know.
Great. Any other thoughts or comments about either how New Zealand does present itself at these sessions, or how New Zealand could present itself at these type of summits from the rest of the panel? Who do you think should be attending, you know, the next sessions?
Well, there was, I think Canada had a stall there, or it may have been the Future Food Tech one, which was straight after. And I did see there were a couple of, I think a couple of the states, the US states, actually had a stand or a stall there where they were representing themselves and the kind of funding they could put into things and how they could collaborate with companies. So, you know, there's always that kind of approach. I don't know how you get into that kind of thing, but you presumably have to contact the conference organizers and find out about that. But it strikes me that it would be really cool if they had a main stage session where they highlighted some other countries. And it could be you have likes of Israel sitting up there, but you also have New Zealand, Australia, Netherlands, whoever else up there kind of showcasing what they do and have a whole panel about who are the different countries outside the US, because it is a very US heavy presence because it's in the US. And that, you know, for most people going there, I'm assuming they're going there to engage primarily with some US customers or partners or investors.
Yeah, that's a really important point. I mean, the same organizers run the event in Singapore as an Asia Pacific, and that actually does have a very different orientation. You know, and I think does fairly represent what's going on in the region, Asia Pacific region, at that event. And Brendan, maybe you can comment on the one in London as to whether you think that's more balanced in terms of how it positions countries and innovation.
Yeah, I think it was a global view. It had, even though it was in London, and it had more than just a UK and EU feel to it. There was a big US presence there, and quite a big presence from Australia and from other groups. So it was a global conference in London.
Yeah,
definitely.
And that was the original one. So that was the first one they created, was the one in London. I think, I mean, just for the audience who's listening, I think depending on what your interest is, it is important to determine which of these events you go to. So same organizer, but you kind of need to think, okay, where's my, you know, geographical area of focus? Because the one in Singapore is, you know, very focused on what's happening in Asia, Southeast Asia, India, Middle East. So if that's kind of your area of exploration, then you should attend that one. So you'll get, for example, you'll get Temasek, which is the Singaporean government's investment arm, is very heavily represented there. And so you'll get the stakeholders for that region, and you won't see the American ones. So that's another thing you got to think about is, okay, actually, you know, who am I trying to get to know? That's an important consideration.
But you probably have some participants who are going to many of them as well, or at least you know, I think we've, you know, sort of or if there's a particular venue or theme that's important to them, they're going to it year after year after year, and so building up a you know, it has its own community and to some extent its own hierarchy within those conferences as well. I think we talked a little bit before about the importance of actually, you know, working the event in the way that the event is structured, about, you know, setting up meetings before you arrive, you know, being very structured around how you do introduce yourselves before arriving and getting ready for those type of events.
Yeah, it's certainly useful too. For the joint venture, we only kicked off in start of February, but there'd been a lot of background work leading up to that in preparation, so a reasonable understanding of the companies out there that might have technology or tool or solution that we can bring to New Zealand. So we're looking globally for solutions to bring to New Zealand. Some of the work's been done here, of course, but there was still, so I set up in advance the ones we knew, you know, meetings with those that we knew about that had real potential to create impact here with our pasture-based farming system with livestock, but certainly met quite a few new potential startups, and there was a good startup pitching area. So, you know, also heard about Aaron's colleague who's working on some methane mitigation right here in New Zealand and had to go across the world to do that. So that was interesting. But we've had a lot of follow-ups actually.
I'm not even going to unpick the irony about air miles to learn about, you know.
I know. It's not good. Yeah. We will meet in Auckland as well, aren't we, Aaron? It's a bit less harsh on the environment.
I think we would have met eventually.
Yeah.
But yes, it sped that up, and yeah, made that connection. And I guess there's always a natural urge to catch up with other Kiwis while you're there, if you know of any. So, you know, you can go through their online system and look at all the different attendees. You can search by country, you can search by company, and you can do all that in advance and really, you know, pinpoint who you want to talk to, reach out to them through their online platform in advance of the conference, arrange those meetings, and that really pays off. I mean, as somebody coming into this one for the first time, I didn't really know who I wanted to talk to, so I didn't set up a lot of meetings. I kind of just went out there with an open mind to kind of talk to whoever I bumped into and whatever caught my eye while I was there, which I generally did. And that was, you know, that was reasonably fruitful, but I think you would get way more out of it if you do that advanced preparation. And that's what we typically do with other conventions, conferences that we go to in other industries, you know, pharmaceuticals, that sort of thing.
yeah, that platform is amazing. And so like a lot of my discussions, like I set up a heap of meetings and had a whole lot of discussions before I'd even arrived. So that made the time at the conference like really useful. That that platform and the ability to find relevant people is very, very good.
Right. I'm very conscious of the time and the need for everyone to go and start their day in New Zealand there, but maybe just one final comment from each of you in terms of, what would you, will you attend a future summit, and what would you hope to have achieved both either by that summit or at that next summit? So Ruth, are you going to go again?
Sure, I'll go first. I'm definitely attending, myself or colleagues, as we're trying to continually find the technologies or tools best suited for New Zealand farmers. And look, I actually came away quite hopeful, even though time is pressing with respect to emissions and mitigation and levies and policies. I still really believe in a quote I heard from Bill Gates, I think on a podcast, that we did innovate our way into a situation with climate, and we can certainly innovate our way out.
Good quote.
If I can jump in next, because I've actually got to get off this call to go to an investor call, speaking of all of that. So look, I just think to echo the points that were made earlier, that it's really important to prepare in advance for the event, do a lot of desk research, and know why you're going and who you need to talk to, and try and build those relationships ahead of time if you can. I'll also briefly answer Kylie's question that she posted in the channel. I didn't see or particularly notice a lot of heavy leaning on the carbon credit topic myself. It's not to say that it wasn't presented, but I think that in the hierarchy of needs of what people are trying to do, I don't think it was anywhere near the top of that list. But I'll see what the other guys think of that.
Great.
Thanks for the opportunity, Brendan. I'll
thank you very much, Darren. And just while you're all still here, but we will give time to Aaron and Peter to wrap up. Just want to thank all of you for coming and joining together here. I think the AgriTech ecosystem in New Zealand is very lucky to have you guys as participants in it and to be going out and doing the work that you've been doing and bringing it back. So thank you to our panelists for doing that. Darren, goodbye. I know you need to go off to get some money. Aaron and Peter, just your final comments on going next time. What would be the different view you take?
Yeah, I think it's likely. I'll certainly be looking seriously at going again. Hopefully next time I'll have a fuller pocket of projects and potential investments that I can talk about to people. So I've got a bit of legwork to do at the university to identify where our sort of skills and capabilities and nascent future spin-outs are that I can direct into the agri-tech kind of space. So I would certainly be considering that. And I think that one in particular in the US, because the US is clearly such a massive market. I mean, you can just be dealing with one state in the US and it's bigger than all of New Zealand in terms of its, customer potential. And then just finally, there was a quote that someone said, apparently it was from the USDA, and I don't know how it translates to the New Zealand situation, but apparently $1 of agri research in the US results in $20 of economic return, which I thought was pretty impressive.
Good. Please tell that to our Minister of Agriculture, Peter.
I'd definitely be keen to go again. This has been super valuable for me and for Zespri. And I think that there's, there are over 2,500 people there, and I only interacted with such a small percentage of those. So there's a lot more value to leverage from a summit like this.
And as Darren started out at the very beginning, I think those relationships build over time. So, you guys would have been planting, as well as, extracting ideas and getting insights yourselves. I'm sure you would have been planting seeds, and returning there will be fruitful for you guys in the future. Well, it is time to kick into the rest of the day. So Ruth, Aaron, Peter, really thank you for your time and your insights. Very generous to spend all of the time traveling and then come and spend more time sharing it with the wider community here. Really appreciate that, and look forward to seeing you all again soon. And I would just like to thank Emily and Kylie and Otto in the background, making everything work here so smoothly today, and thank all of the members who turned up and joined this session, and for your input along the way. Look forward to further discussions. So have a good day, guys.
Thanks very much.
Appreciate you, Brendan. Thank you.
Bye.